Привет, I'm Chuck Olenek, a Ukrainian-American who was baptized with the name Yaroslav, and that's the name that I use in the historical reenactment group, the Society for Creative Anachronism. I decided, after doing a bunch of research for decades, oh god, that's embarrassing, on Slavic folklore and mythology and history, I figured I better share this with people. So I decided I would make videos and I'd put them up on my YouTube channel so that there would be a way for people to access the information if they want to develop an Eastern European persona. All right, so I called this Birch Bark Books. Okay, it's not really about books, but I like the alliteration. I ended up going down a rabbit hole. I really like fantasy books, and I decorate my house with all sorts of fantasy-oriented stuff. So I've got Frazetta Conan posters up on the wall, and I've got a rug that's a map of Middle-earth here in the office where I'm sitting, and there's one of Lankmar that's out in the dining room, map of the city. And I was searching for one of the Hyborian Age because I figured that would be perfect. Well, I couldn't find a rug, but what I found instead was a map of the Hyborian Age of Conan done on birch bark. And that led to my exploration of this new rabbit hole. You can find using birch bark as a writing surface in numerous cultures, but it was around the city of Veliki Novgorod. Okay, now we're just going to call that Novgorod from now on, in northwest Russia in 1951. The first birch bark documents were found. Since then, over 1,200 letters from the period 1050 to 1500 have been discovered around 12 Russian cities, although Novgorod remains by far the most prolific source. By prolific, I mean seriously prolific. 90% of those letters were discovered in Novgorod. But this is partly due to Novgorod's thick, slightly acidic soil, and it preserved organic materials such as wood, leather, and bone pretty well. And there have been some other excavations like in Ukraine and in Belarus where such documents have been found, but really the source is Novgorod. Okay, why use birch bark? Parchment was expensive compared to parchment, which was used for liturgical books, high literature, legal texts, and paper, which was first imported into Russia in the 14th century. Birch bark was free, widely available. There's forests of it. So how did they write on birch bark? First I thought it was about using ink, and I was trying to find what kind of ink could possibly have been used. And then I thought back to that Conan map, and I thought, wood burning? Wood burning seems really freaking labor intensive. It doesn't seem very efficient at all. It turns out no ink was used during the writing. The words were scratched on the softer inner bark of or inner surface of the birch bark, and so it hasn't faded with time. And for scratching, people used a type of stylus called a pasalo. And until researchers actually found the first birch bark letters, they were trying to figure out what these metal objects were that they were finding. They'd found about 200, most were made of iron, some of bronze, some of bone, and that those were the instruments used to write on the birch bark. Okay, I'm going to throw in a side note. The hollow stylus that's used to write pisanki, because you don't paint the Easter eggs, you write them, just like you write an icon. That's called a kistka, and kistka translates as bone. These birch bark letters, known as Hramoti na Beresti. I remember hearing, I think bereza was the term for birch in Ukrainian. Okay, these covered all sorts of things. There were personal letters, there was religious stuff, business letters, administrative content. Most of these letters were written in Old East Slavic and in the Old Novgorodian dialect. However, about 56 letters were written in other languages: Old Church Slavonic, Greek, Latin, German, and then the picture you're looking at is the earliest form of Finnish. Okay, what's in the letters? Let's see. So we got the religious writing, documentation of the death of princes, conclusions of peace, dignitary arrivals, folk verses, local proverbs, even doodling. While legal related matters included accusations, witnesses and the procedure of evidence, payments and fines, theft, fraud, as well as wife beating. There's one letter that reads, "Sell the house and come to Smolensk or to Kiev. Bread is cheap. If you cannot come, write to me about your health." Oh, here's one. This was dated around 1080 to 1100 AD, so somewhere in there. It's a passionate letter of an abandoned young woman, and it's been torn in two and thrown away, maybe by the recipient. Adding to the difficulty of translation, the language and writing system has changed drastically over the centuries. Well, duh. For example, there is no punctuation or spaces between words, and for everyday writing, people use different characters, which I'm sure made it even more complicated. The letters were often written in the vernacular. A few documents include elaborate obscenities. Let me read a few of these examples. From Boris to Nastasia, as soon as this letter arrives, send me a man on a stallion, because I have a lot of work here. And send a shirt. I forgot a shirt. From Ilika to Ilya. Suika is overriding the marks on the oaks and has taken out the honey from the hives, saying, "I am taking away the oaks on my own mark." He is cutting away the cut mark, saying, "It is my oak. Your former beekeeper has fallen into robbery, and now come here yourself, confirm your ownership of the bee yard." Greetings from Radko to his father. I have sent the goods to Smolensk, but they have murdered Putlia and they want me. And Vyeska instead of Foma, saying, "Pay 400 grivnas or call Foma here, otherwise we will put you in jail." And greetings from Vyeska to Lazar. I have sent the pack horse and I myself am ready. A letter from Ziroko or letter to Ziroko and from Tesko to Vidovin. Why are you damaging other people's pigs? Nozdrika has made this known, and you have disgraced the entire Union end. There has been a letter from the other side of the river. It was about horses, that you have done the same with them. Greetings from Panfil to Mark and to the priest. Buy some lamp oil and send it over. We've also got a couple of different marriage proposals here. Okay, the one you're looking at, it's a manuscript from the 13th century. It's a marriage proposal from a guy called Mikita to a girl called Melania. One might assume that back in that day, that's not how it was done. And the young man was supposed to receive the girl's parents' blessing and launch the long process of matchmaking. Apparently that wasn't the case. Okay, here's another one. And it's addressed in the usual way, from so-and-so to so-and-so. So it's from Nikita this time to Ulyanitsa. Marry me. I want you and you me. And as witness will be Ignato. Here's one where the groom's mother is negotiating with a matchmaker. Birch bark letters could be as small as 2 inches by half an inch, or as large as 18.5 by 6.5. They were typically trimmed down to the size after the inscription. The bark smooth to the touch, and it's inscribed on the inside or concave face, although sometimes the outside of the bark, which was harder to inscribe, was also used. The bark consists of thin layers, which may be separated either to reveal smoother inner layers, which are easier to inscribe, or to create duplicates of letters. Carbon paper, if you know what that is. Okay, I found an excuse to use another Angus McBride painting, this one from the book, Armies of Medieval Russia, 750 to 1250. Letters were rolled up for travel and carried by messengers, either within the city or to other cities in Rus. And you can see the birch bark rolled up in the monk's hand. So these messengers sometimes read their messages aloud, and they performed physical gestures such as bowing and probably using a proper heraldic voice, and provided further details to the recipient of the letter. Space was sometimes left beneath a message for a reply, and occasionally a single letter might end up working for that. And letters were often read and then discarded. Some people kept theirs. Okay, there's another excuse to use another Angus McBride painting. The decline in birch bark writing around the 1230s, 1240s looks like it was probably a result of the Mongol invasions of Rus. Now, things kind of quieted down, and from 1025 to 1100, apparently it was just a handful of birch bark letters, and then starting up around 1300 to 1500, there have been 415 letters found, so things must have settled down some. Okay, but I'm not done with birch bark books. What I'm going to do next time is I'm going to tell the story of, I believe, a 13th century boy from Novgorod named Onfin. He left us records of what he wrote. Until the next time, do pobачення.